So I want you to be thinking after each presentation, something that impacted you from the presentation as your aha moment. We're going to pass this little bits of paper around. We're going to have a jar that you're going to place those, you'll fold them and place them in there. And at the end of each session, we're going to, at the start of the next session, after lunch, we're going to shake it, and somebody will get a prize, okay? So we want to see that you're going to remember some of the salient points that are presented, okay? So look out for, make notes of your aha moments, okay? Right, so just one more thing. Right. The next item on the agenda is we're going to look at a case. That is how water utilities are building climate resilience. And the case study is one from WASCO, and it will be presented by Mr. Mandil Alse, who is a management trainee and now doing his rounds with the strategic planning department. So I invite Mr. Alse, and I know his boss is going to be watching him.
Thank you, Mr. John. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Yeah, I know we're well fed, so let's have some light in there. Let me also take this opportunity to thank all our visitors to our beautiful island of St. Lucia. And I always take the opportunity to upsell. So just let me tell you that St. Lucia is actually the #1 honeymoon destination in the world. And of course, I will encourage you also to feel free to have a cold piton at some point in time, or a refreshing glass of Chairman's Reserve. So, back to our proceedings now. This case study looks at WASCO's path in terms of developing our non-revenue water reduction strategy. The strategy, I must tell you, is at an advanced stage. It's not finalized yet, so we're still doing some work on it. But I thought it would be useful just to provide you with a little flavor of what we've done so far and how we've gotten to the point that we are today. Non-revenue water, you have heard it from what Mr. Lee said, you have heard it from Mr. Jean as well, and you just heard it from our previous presenter. If we're going to talk about building resilience and making use of our limited water resources, then we can't be using so much water. We have to find creative ways of reducing our water losses and maximizing our limited water resources. So in terms of what I will be speaking of, we're going to look at water and place it in the context of sustainable development. Mr. Jean already alluded to that in terms of its number 6, in terms of the sustainable development goals set out by the United Nations. Some of the major challenges for WASCO, and I'm sure they will not be new, as other water utilities in the region may be facing similar challenges as well. What is non-revenue water? Some background and the reasons for the high levels of non-revenue water. What is the vision, the mission, and the objectives of the strategy that we're looking to develop, what we're going to do? How are we actually going to do it? Just to give you a little flavor of that as well. And then we're also going to talk about some ongoing work that we have going on with GIZ. And excuse me, I cannot pronounce the long meaning of the word, but GIZ is fine. Right, Timo? It's fine. So, as you see here, clean water and sanitation as Sustainable Development Goal 6. And what does that say? It says that to ensure the availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation to all. Under that, hello? Right, so under that, it looks at providing access to safe and affordable drinking water, also issues as it relates to increase water efficiency across sectors and ensure sustainable supply. So in other words, that puts the whole concept of our non-revenue water into a broader kind of like international context in terms of where we're going with our national strategies. Some of the major challenges that we face, of course, some of it has already been mentioned: decrease in the availability of fresh water resources, and of course, we've increased in dry spells. Most persons across the region would have realized this year we had a very bad dry spell that was particularly bad in the south of the island in St. Lucia. Of course, we're vulnerable to natural hazards and climatic events. Of course, we have increasing demand for water with population increases. Of course, increasing economic activity across various sectors: agriculture, hotel, commercial enterprises. Of course, the whole issue of non-revenue water. We have high water losses as a result of theft or leakages. Of course, we have inefficient supply networks, alluding to the high levels of non-revenue water. And I was really happy to hear the previous presenter speak about data, because that's an issue that we have as well in terms of an inadequate data management system. And to make informed decisions in the water sector, it needs to be backed by reliable data, and that is very important. And of course, I'm sure all utilities in here will attest that there are constraints, especially on the financial side, and of course, human resource constraints. In terms of what is non-revenue water, as I have it there simply put, water that has been supplied within the distribution system, but it has not been paid for. And it comprises of real physical losses, apparent losses, and unbilled authorized consumption. And there's an equation that tells you what non-revenue water is, which is system input volume minus authorized billed consumption. Just to give you an illustration of what constitutes non-revenue water. So if you look at your system inputs on the left, part of it would be authorized consumption as well as water losses. But under authorized consumptions, you would have your billed authorized consumption, which would form part of your revenue water. But your unbilled authorized consumption would form part of your non-revenue water, as well as your apparent losses and your real losses. So just to provide you some background, the whole thing about non-revenue water in St. Lucia, it's not new. Some reports have already been produced, and what we've done is basically pulled from all those resources and have all those things in kind of like a central location to basically generate like a coordinated approach to reducing non-revenue water. The 2012 report estimated non-revenue water in St. Lucia at 56%. In 2018, a water audit was also done for the south of the island, and it estimated non-revenue water at 43%. However, one of the major challenges with both those reports is the validity of the estimates. In both situations, the data validity score for both reports was below 50. So again, it goes back to what we were saying about the whole data management and having sound data to make decisions. What are some of the possible reasons for those high level of non-revenue water? Aging infrastructure, which makes them more susceptible to leaks and breaks. Missing an old customer meter, leading to under-reading or under-billing. So non-revenue water is not just about the leaks and the busted pipes. Persons stealing water or not paying for what they actually consume is actually part of non-revenue water. Of course, you have high maintenance costs and limited financing, illegal connections, as I just alluded to. Also, outdated information and customer management systems, and the impact of extreme weather events such as tropical storms and hurricanes. And we just saw in the previous presentation that we sit right in the hurricane belt. So why reduce non-revenue water? On the right, which is the circle in red, is what is referred to as the vicious cycle. With the vicious cycle, you find negativity tends to reinforce negativity. So when you have high levels of non-revenue water, you have situations where your revenue will decrease and your operating costs will also increase. And as a result, your expenditure will be concentrated on just meeting customer demand. So you're always in what we call firefighting mode. And then as a result, your operational budgets are reduced, especially in the areas of doing your annual maintenance. So with our non-revenue water reduction program, we want to move from the vicious cycle in red to the virtuous cycle in green. With the virtuous cycle, when non-revenue water decreases, of course you will have increases in revenue and your operational costs will decrease because your systems are more efficient. Your expenditure is increased, but to include operational improvements in terms of how you make your system better. And of course, if you have more revenue, then of course you would have investments to be made to further reduce non-revenue water. So in terms of WASCO's overall non-revenue water strategy and where the impetus came, of course, at the national level, the Prime Minister, the Minister for Water has lamented that WASCO has to do something about the high levels of non-revenue water. I'm happy to see that we have a representative from the regulator as well, because they've been on our backs too about reducing non-revenue water if we want a tariff increase. So we have to get our act in order. So WASCO has its own strategic plan from the period 2019 to 2023, and non-revenue water is at the top of the strategic objectives to be achieved. So this strategy is intended to address the framework and actions needed to achieve that strategic activity 1 in our strategic plan. The plan was developed internally, led by WASCO staff through the strategic planning department, and we also got support from external consultants through a consultancy titled The Institutional and Organizational Strengthening of WASCO and Regional Water Utilities. I'll talk about that a bit later. So in terms of our approach to developing our non-revenue water strategy, we wanted to build ownership and awareness within WASCO and key stakeholders about non-revenue water, because it's everybody's business. Whether you work in water or not, it's your business, because at the end of the day, we can't live without water. Water is life. We also wanted to build on the existing work already done on non-revenue water in St. Lucia, because it makes no sense paying another consultancy to come and tell you the same thing that you probably would have had from all the previous reports that you've done, and then it goes on a shelf somewhere. We also wanted to foster a can-do attitude among our staff members in terms of reducing non-revenue water. We have a lot of capable staff. They're very knowledgeable about the system, and it's good to tap into that expertise to see how we can address that problem. And of course, as I said, we want to involve staff across all departments. It's not just a water services thing or a customer services thing or production and treatment thing. It's a cross-cutting, multi-departmental approach. So in terms of what the vision of the strategy is, it will enable WASCO to efficiently operate a water supply system that provides a high level of service to customers and makes efficient use of scarce water resources, so building resilience. The mission: to launch and maintain a sustainable and economically viable non-revenue water reduction program. And economically viable meaning that we don't want to run a program and it's gonna basically bankrupt us. So it has to be to a point where it makes economic sense to keep reducing non-revenue water. The objective is that within the next 5 years, WASCO has reduced non-revenue water to less than 25% and implements a sustained non-revenue water reduction program. And critical word there being program, not a project, because we want this to be ongoing even beyond the 5 years. So that's why we're taking the approach of involving staff, because we want non-revenue water reduction to be the way we actually carry out our day-to-day duties at WASCO. So in terms of reducing non-revenue water, we're going to be tackling both physical losses and apparent losses simultaneously. In terms of physical losses, some of the activities we're going to be doing will involve things like pressure management, active leakage control, asset management, and speedy and quality repairs to our network. In terms of the apparent losses, we're going to be looking at things like customer meter management, water accounting controls, data handling controls, and of course enforcement of some of our existing policies that we have in place. Now, a lot of those things are not new. You probably pick up any non-revenue water text or whatever, and you will see those same things. So those things are not something new or specific only to our context in St. Lucia, but it is very much applicable to what we want to do. So what we've done with each of those areas, we've broken down, and we have some over hundreds of activities that we have under each of those sections in terms of our coordinated strategic activities to reducing non-revenue water. And what we've done, we've further broken that down into what each specific department would be responsible for in terms of their efforts to reduce non-revenue water. So what would be the aim of those strategic activities? It would be to establish and maintain reliable estimates of non-revenue water, and we spoke about the issues with the data. So we want to ensure that when we do our water audits, that the data upon which that is done is sound and very reliable. We want to sustainably reduce the volume of real losses on service connections, storage tanks, transmission and distribution mains, sustainably reduce the volume of apparent water losses, create the enabling environment for the implementation and operations of a sustainable long-term non-revenue reduction program. Of course, we want to build awareness and ownership among employees and key stakeholders on the importance of non-revenue water reduction. We want to facilitate effective monitoring and evaluation of the strategy because that is important. We want to strive for continuous improvement. We don't want the strategy to be very rigid, but to be updated continuously based on our own experiences. And of course, we want to foster relationships with international and regional partners, which is where you guys come in, where you can share experiences, what has worked, what hasn't worked, what are you doing in your countries, and as well what are we doing here at WASCO. Now, in support of our non-revenue water development strategy, we've been getting some assistance from GIZ, as I alluded to earlier, through a consultancy. Currently, we've had 8 missions that have been undertaken in areas such as network management, hydraulics, GIS and asset mapping, and monitoring and evaluation. And this consultancy concludes in November this year. So although the consultancy is concluded, but our work keeps going. So some of the things that we've done under this consultancy has to do with developing standard operating procedures, and we think that this is important. Although some departments had it pretty well written, they were weak in other areas, and we found that it is important that we document some of those things. Because a lot of persons, they know their jobs well in their heads, and that is fine, but for continuity purposes, and of course, if you're looking at a long-term non-revenue reduction program, you have to find a store for all that valuable information that we have from our staff. So just to give you an idea of a lot of the workshops that we did, and then we move from this to the official documents, the SOPs themselves. We also had a myriad of workshops in areas such as the benefits of GIS and asset management, meter management, dealing with repairs, replacements, illegal connections, undertaking water network repairs and leak detection, and the establishment of a supplies advisory committee. We also had capacity building workshops in a number of areas. Yes, Mr. Reese, that is you blocking your face, I don't know why. Flow and pressure management, hydraulic design of water and distribution systems, the basics of water demand forecasting, developing a maintenance schedule, and the implementation of district metered areas, or what is referred to as DMAs. So a lot of work has been going on with the GIZ, and we found them immensely We've also had an increase in the use of GIS within WASCO, and it's important because it can assess and analyze the present network conditions. Of course, leads to better and faster decision making. You can map out your leakage hotspots, improve asset management, aids in your master planning, and of course, it can be connected to your computer information, your customer information system, and your order hydraulics models. These apps, they're mobile application apps that are directly connected to our GIS in the office, and they were actually developed in-house by our GIS unit with the assistance of the GIS consultants. So one of them actually focuses on customer service and metering. So it provides a pretty quick and efficient way of mapping out our customer meters and their location. And the next one actually deals with leakage, reporting leaks. And if you're looking at reducing non-revenue water, the speed at which you respond to those leaks is important. So the more precise the location, the less time you spend driving around looking for leaks. I don't know in other Caribbean countries, but here it can be a challenge getting a specific location of a leak from a customer. You probably get something like the red house in the corner, they have a dustbin in red on the bridge. That'll be difficult to get a location from that. So with this app, it can help to quickly zero in on exactly where the locations are. So good job by our GIS unit. Just to give you an idea of our GIS maps, I just took a picture and just threw it in there. We've also implemented, as part of our non-revenue water reduction strategy, a pilot implementation zone. And it basically provides an area to be used for testing of specific activities to be undertaken as part of the broader non-revenue reduction program. So before we go wholesale with something, we want to test it in a controlled environment first to see if it works, make the necessary changes before we launch on a national level. And of course, we do training in both practical and theoretical stuff. So the area highlighted in yellow is actually one DMA within the PIC. And the picture on the left, that's when we're actually doing group work in terms of determining where we're going to install certain measuring devices like PRVs within the project, the pilot implementation. So very important, monitoring and evaluation, and of course, it also connects directly to the whole issue of data management. Effective monitoring and evaluation will provide this strategy with the framework to ensure its successful implementation. So as a result, we've developed M&E framework, kind of like a tool using KPIs that would measure our performance, can ensure that we communicate effectively with our stakeholders and our partners like WRMA and the NERC. And the picture just shows like an interface of what the M&E tool looks like. So some of the other general ongoing initiatives at WASCO to address non-revenue water, we're going to be implementing a new customer information system. Of course, just spoke about that, the increased use of GIS and the continued mapping of our assets within the database. We have the implementation of the pilot zone, the installation of bulk meters at all our production sites, and that's important. You can only know your volumes of non-revenue water if you actually know how much you're producing. To actively identify and reduce illegal connection, and we're going to be appointing what we refer to as a non-revenue water champion team, and they will be responsible for overseeing the implementation of the strategy. And under them, there will be a program coordinator, kind of like bringing all those strategic activities that I alluded to earlier together, along with its focal points, which will be from each respective department. So one from customer services, one from water services, design construction, looking at hydraulics, and of course, a GIS expert. So in terms of what will be some of our next steps, we'll be finalizing the strategy. We'll also be establishing those key processes, going back to the SOPs that I spoke about earlier. We're going to be doing some data entry and more actively using our GIS. The design and implementation of a metering program. So again, it goes back to what I said about the bulk meters and also replacing of our inactive customer meters. Developed and test approaches and training our staff. That will be done within the PIZ. So we'll be looking at areas such as doing a water audits, repairs, and those sort of things, establishing DNAs. We'll also be doing some work on the Northern distribution line, carrying out hydraulic analysis. Also, we'll be doing a water demand forecast for 2040. It's not in my water, I will do that. Of course, the M&E tool that is being finalized, and I just showed you that earlier. And of course, we're going to prepare an annual work plan for year 2 because we're already in year 1, so this is taken directly from the annual work plan for year 1. It also has the timelines and the responsible departments and persons. So final thoughts, the success of the strategy will depend on the commitment of all parties involved to undertake the necessary strategic activities aimed at reducing system losses and improving network efficiency. And of course, we need to continuously monitor and evaluate to ensure that we are actually meeting our objectives. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Alcee. Let's hear it again to Mr. Alcee. Now, one of the things that stuck out of this presentation is about the support from the GIZ. And among some of the work that CAWASA does in support of our member utilities is a sort of collaboration to get the sort of twinning programs. Although this one in particular is directly with the German government and government of St. Lucia and WASCO. But the cooperation is that where you have what we call the water operators partnerships, which is also supported at the level of the UN Water, Global Water Operators Partnerships Alliance, GWOPA, based in Barcelona, Spain. And CAWASA is the Joint Secretariat with the CWWA in coordinating such activities. And it's one of these things that is very good for peer-to-peer relations and how we can learn from each other. Some utilities have some strengths and others, each utility has various strengths and we can exchange. And when you as operators, and I know it has happened where you have issues, you know, we just use your WhatsApp and other technology to reach each other to solve problems, right? But just before I move on, I'd just like to recognize Mr. Timo Schimmel of the GIZ. Timo, please come up here. I want you to do something, because we have been having a little difficulty with our German. I wanted to say, Deutsch Gesellschaft International Summer Light. Did I have it right?
Almost. It's well, GIZ is indeed. I doubt that anybody. GIZ is working in way over 100 countries, and I doubt that anybody really knows the full name from our international partners. So it's Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit. It's a long name, and it just stands for the German Agency for Development Cooperation.
Thank you. Thank you. I challenge any of you to come up here and repeat that for me. I'll see you at the bar tonight. The drinks are on me. No, that's if you can pronounce this word in German, like this guy. So there's another point that was critical in that presentation. It's about documentation. And what Mandel said was that many people know the work very well, they can do it very well. But when you look for continuity, if God forbid a big truck should roll over you as you cross the street, what happens tomorrow? we have to try to reinvent the wheel to get, and we can't get that knowledge you have in your head. So it is important that we're able to document these things. And many of our utilities haven't done that much as towards if you have some new entrants into the sector, to be able to have continuity. So that is very critical. And some of the good work that you're doing about this app that was developed, first time hearing of this. I remember the presentation by Mr. Etinoff this morning. You are doing a lot of fabulous work, but the public doesn't know about it. And I send emails, I call, and we try to get this newsletter, we try to put up on our WhatsApp page, and to let the public know what we are doing in the water sector. So please, let us share that, let us blow our trumpet, that we are doing great things. Let's hear it again from Andy. Now that takes me, and I think we're doing very well for time, we're catching up. I think the little snacks we do very well. We're going to now have a presentation from Charybdis. That is another partner of ours, because in the Caribbean, we have various water sources. In St. Lucia and the Windward Islands, we have mountains and streams, and we still have a fairly good bit of rainforest. So we have surface water. In Barbados in the east, they depend a lot on groundwater. And perhaps in South America as well, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, a lot of groundwater. As we go further north, there are hardly any forests, and the rain doesn't go up in that side in the Leeward Islands. That's why they call Leeward Islands. So what do? I mean, in one day we get more rainfall than these islands get in a whole year. So what do? They now have had to go to desalination systems. And one of our partners in the region, with helping to get water and give life to people, they have been able to find technologies and improve on them all the time. It's the Caribbean Desalination Association. And we, CAWASA, also have an MOU with them and partners. So today we have with us Mr. Jerry Mateo, who's going to tell us about what they're doing in the role of RO systems in increasing resilience in the water sector. Mr. Mateo is based in the island of Puerto Rico, and I invite him here to make a presentation. And of course, I also bring the greetings from, as you have seen in the magazine, from the president of the association. Thank you.
Thank you, Ignatius, and thank you, everyone. Thanks for having Charybdis here. I guess I wanted to say real quickly. So I'm a director of Charybdis. I guess I wear different hats like a lot of you do. And one of the hats I wear is obviously water tech. I work for water tech. Yeah, you can see it outside. So I've already come to the conference because I was going to have an exhibit and sponsor. And about 2 weeks ago, the president of the board of directors of Charybdis called me. His name is Sean Meyer Steele. And he asked, Jerry, I know you're going down there. And just for synergy, would you mind just giving a little 5-minute presentation on Charybdis? So I said, sure. But fortunately, I looked into the agenda and I see it was like a 30-minute presentation. So I put this together last weekend on my sofa, and hopefully it addresses the theme. The previous, I guess I also want to say this is my first time in Coast, and I'm already super impressed. So now I feel like I have this dilemma because you want to participate in the CWA. I'm already part of Charybdis, and now I feel like I have to do more with CAWASA just because there's such synergy here. So, okay, there's my info if you want to contact me later about anything that I talk about. Okay. I thought obviously I should tell you a little bit about Charybdis. Take this. Hello.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a walk-around person. Yeah, I'm more of a walk-around type person too. So Charybdis is fairly new, formed in 2007. How old is CAWASA, by the way? How old?
CAWASA goes back in the 90s, I think.
Oh boy, okay. And we know CWA is like, I don't know, I think 35 or 50 years old. So we're fairly new, and then you probably haven't heard about us. And I think that, sometimes you feel like, wow, we're asking people to spread their time in too many different directions in a small region, but I guess we all have our specialties. So we are, our mission statement, like an excerpt of it is right there in the second line. We're more oriented toward promoting the proper use of desalination in the region and water reuse also. And you guys, from what I understand, Kawasa, you're really oriented toward training. So there is a synergy among all of us, including CWA. We have about 200 members. Do you know the difference between biennial and biannual? I made sure to look that up. We have our biennial conference. That means every 2 years we have our conference. Our next conference is in 2020 in Bahamas. I'll just mention that in case you want to learn more about it. You can take a look at our website, the address is up there. And we're associated, like you, we're associated with different other groups. We're associated with the International Desalination Association also. So for today, I thought maybe the first thing I would do is talk a little bit about exactly what reverse osmosis is, then get into more the theme of what we're supposed to be talking about, is the role of desalination in the Caribbean, especially in the area of supporting resilience. And last, a little bit about a collaboration that I know is going on that Ignatius probably knows more about than I do. So how many people have never heard of Caribe before? Never heard of it? Yeah, a lot. So today's your day to learn a little bit about us. All right. Our region, of course, I think there was some great, the previous presentations couldn't have been better. I guess it's no coincidence that you set these up in this order. I just thought some of the slides and the others were just great. The one slide that showed the percentages of different types of water that we use in the region was great. Discussion a little bit about how you move up north, it gets drier. So that's the region that we live in. And we have these various sources of water available to us. I like this slide. I mean, these slides, you might find these things in the literature that are a little bit different, that classify water in different ways. But I like this because you hear about brackish water, fresh water. We all know what seawater is, but what exactly are they technically? So, I don't know that these are, you might find some little difference, but when I look in the literature, I always find brackish defined as up to about 10,000 parts per million of dissolved solids. So TDS is total dissolved solids. I didn't want to get too technical, but I am an engineer, so we end up doing that. So a lot of you that are dealing with surface water or wastewater, you're probably measuring, a lot of the operators are measuring suspended solids, right? Do you guys measure suspended solids, anybody? Or turbidity, right? So those are particles in the water, but we also can have solids that are dissolved into solution. So salt is an example of that, right? Salt at home in a shaker is a solid, but if we pour it into water, it dissolves into solution. So dissolved solids are what we talk a lot about in desalination. And you can see that the kind of water most of us use in the southern part of the Caribbean especially is on the left end there, fresh and brackish water. I like this slide too. Again, I don't know how exact it is. So this is something I found that shows what the US EPA says is drinkable in terms of dissolved solids. On the left, we have like bottled water would be way down there, and reverse osmosis you can see on the far left. But you can drink higher levels of dissolved solids. It certainly depends on what they are. Calcium is another mineral that will dissolve. It's a solid in certain situations, but if we add it to water, it'll dissolve. So calcium's not bad for you. Magnesium and iron in the right concentrations aren't bad for you. So you can drink dissolved solids. And those utilities that desal water actually are giving their customers much higher levels of dissolved solids than a freshwater or brackish water plant is. So I really wanted to show that because we have to go from here, look on the right, 35,000, 40,000 parts per million dissolved solids. We've got to get it down to something that we could drink if we're going to use it as a drinking water source. I like this slide. This is shown in many different forms in the literature. I know it's complicated, but it really shows you what reverse osmosis is. If we look To the right, we're looking at large particles like sand, carbon, and at the bottom here in these green colors, these are the types of filtration that would remove the particles that are shown above them. So the bigger particles we can remove with just media filters, right? As we move to the left, we get into smaller particles and more fine types of filtration to remove those particles. So we get into microfiltration, ultrafiltration, nano, and reverse osmosis. So if you look to the left, you can see that reverse osmosis will actually remove aqueous salts. That's the dissolved solids we're talking about. So really, RO is just a very fine form of filtration that can not only take, well, we don't want it to take out solid particles because it'll foul. We'll talk about that in a second. We want it to take out dissolved solids. I didn't know if I should even put this in there. I didn't know if it was too technical, but I thought I would do it anyway. So this, osmosis is a naturally occurring phenomenon in science and nature. And what it is I look at this slide over and over, and it doesn't to me make common sense, but it is true, and it does, science works this way. If we've got a semi-permeable membrane, that black vertical membrane in the center there, and we've got on one side of the membrane a water with high concentration of dissolved solids, that would be on the left, let's say seawater, and on the right we have fresh water. I don't know why, in my mind, I always think that water would want to flow from left to right, but it actually flows the other way. And the reason is the fresh water wants to cross the membrane and dilute that concentrated side to make them both equal concentration. So that's osmosis. An example that's often used is if we took a potato and sliced a potato real thin, a potato would be a semi-permeable membrane. The potato, has a lot of moisture in it, right? So that's fresh water. If we put a potato into salt water, the potato will shrivel up. And what you think is, salt's getting into the potato, but it's not that. It's the fresh water leaving the potato trying to dilute the salt water. So that's osmosis. Reverse osmosis is the opposite. So reverse osmosis, we want to do the opposite. We want to actually take the fresh water out of the salt water, let's say, and drive it over through the membrane to a site where we could use it for other purposes, including drinking. But we need pressure to do that. Membranes look like this, if you've never seen them. So some of you I know can talk about countries you work in, you actually work with reverse osmosis, and some of you don't. So membranes, this doesn't really do it justice, but the standard membrane is like 40 inches long. That's an 8-inch diameter. That's one you don't see much. In Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, they use them more because they're so big. That's about 16 inches in diameter. This is, like I said, 8 by 40. This would weigh about 35 pounds dry. So you can imagine when it's wet, it's really heavy, and those are super heavy. You need equipment to even lift them into place. That's what a membrane looks like. This is how they work. In operation, we put water up through the center of the membrane leaves that are folded over each other. The water will run down through the membrane, and on a tangent, fresh water goes through the membrane, comes out the center. And the concentrated salts just continue right on down the line. Again, I don't know if this is, going to help you or hurt you, but I put it in here because we're going to talk a little bit about cost, and the cost of, you always hear desal and reverse osmosis are expensive, and it's because we need pumps to create the energy to create the reverse osmosis. So what I like about this is that this little line here on the bottom left just shows that the pressure that we need to overcome the osmotic pressure and to create this fresh water and seawater is about 1% of the dissolved solid. It's really more than that. We don't have to get into that in too much detail today. It's probably 2 or 3 times that. But so for seawater, 35,000 milligrams per liter of dissolved solids, we need at least 374 psi. And we need more than that because there's a lot of things we have to do with the pressure. This is what an RO system looks like. Does anyone recognize this? Someone should recognize. I see this. Sure. Where are you guys from? Oh, so where do you think that is? Oh, you recognize the system. That's an RO system. Do you know where it is, where that particular system is? Okay, I thought the Antigua guys would notice. That's one of Antigua's systems. That's, you know, Antigua, I know they're on the agenda to talk, and I think Antigua is a really fascinating case study because they were an island that survived off the surface water for a long, long time. And when you fly over there, I always say to them, I know how you did it, because it's a small, dry place. So they survived off of surface water, but they did inherit, this particular plant is called Camp Blizzard, and it was an ex-military base, so they inherited, this was one of their first ROs. But the reason I put this up there is that, so I showed you those membranes, but those membranes are inside these housings. So those long, they could be stainless steel, and normally they're like a composite plastic. Those long housings hold a line of membranes, usually 6 or 7 in a row. I also wanted to show the large pump. I think these are the old pumps, they've changed these, but you can see this is not a very big RO. These make about 250,000 gallons a day. They don't even make 1,000,000 gallons a day. And you can see the size of the pump you need to create the pressure to do that, so you're talking about electricity and money. I like this slide. I don't know if you guys will, but I like it because, so this would be the membranes inside the vessel. 6 membranes inside the vessel. The reason I like it, one other thing I find fascinating is this first membrane is the only membrane that sees the seawater, the real seawater. The first membrane sees the water that comes in from the ocean at 35,000, 50,000 milligrams per liter. The second membrane sees much higher dissolved solids because I pulled water out of that one. The third one sees higher than this one. And down here, this sees the highest. It sees almost double the dissolved solids because all that fresh water has been pulled out. And this is really important. That's why I put it in here. I'm joking that maybe I'm being too technical, but I put it in here especially for those that maybe that don't know about RO, but even those that do, because when you talk to guys that run RO systems, they'll have fouling problems up here where maybe you get sand in the system, but back here this is a completely, this membrane is seeing completely different water, another whole set of problems. But the other reason I put it in there is that we need more pressure, right? Because to overcome this osmotic pressure, we need a lot more pressure than the first membrane. So that's why the pump has to be so big. I'm going to get off of these sort of technical slides in a second. I also wanted to show that I used the word up there system on purpose because this would represent an RO, the vessels and the membranes, but an RO system is more encompassing than that. We've got to, in the case of seawater, we have to bring the water in from the ocean. We've got to get all the sand out, so we're going to go through multimedia, and that's super, super important. We're going to add some chemicals, filter cartridges, we have a high pressure pump, but this area in the front, pre-treatment, is super, super important. I don't know if the guys here from Grenada, do you work on the islands with the RO, or do you work on the main land and surface water?
No, only go to, I think I could take care of.
Right, but they're having a pre-treatment issue, I know. They're getting sand into the RO, and it just won't tolerate that. I know the APUA guys are sort of fighting that too. It's a common problem, that's why I just put that in there. That's what your multimedia filters would look like. The filters that filter out the turbidity and sand, etc., before you get to the reverse osmosis. This one on the left, that's a real one. That's APUA. The one on the right, I'm not sure where that one's from. You can tell it's in front of a shop where it was built, so I'm not sure where it's going. I even went a little further to show you could have even more pre-treatment. You could have a clarifier actually. And some big RO systems do have clarifiers before the multimedia, again to protect the membranes. You can even have ultrafiltration as a pre-treatment for the reverse osmosis. Right. Now I wanted to get into more, I think, what maybe you were looking for in the presentation, which is the role of desal or RO in the world. And you know, those two words we sometimes use interchangeably, desalination and reverse osmosis, but they're not exactly the same thing. So reverse osmosis is a form of desalination, but there's other ways you can desalinate water. You can do it with distillation. These statistics, you know, you could double check them. I looked up a few different sources to try to get them right, and you know, you find some variations, but I think generally they're correct. So I guess the gist here is that you can see from 2007 at the top to 2017 on the bottom, we've got a lot more desalination plants in the world. I thought this number was kind of low. I thought the percent of water being consumed in the world made by desal was maybe higher than that, but what I found was 1% back in 2007. If you do the math, I think this would almost calculate up to close to 10% now, so that's a big, big jump. In the Caribbean, and again, correct me if any of this is not maybe accurate, but I found these statistics, 7,000 little tiny islands. I imagine most are not inhabited in the Caribbean. But it just speaks to the challenges to try to take care of our region. 1 million square miles in the Caribbean. I wouldn't have guessed that. That's a huge land mass, or water mass, or both. So on some of the other slides, we saw the same item here that we see on number 3. Our water sources normally or typically over history were surface water, spring water, groundwater, rainwater. But around us are all these oceans, so that's another source of water. We talked about some of the smaller islands are dry, the volcanic islands. I put the question marks here. Volcanic islands have surface water, but you always hear, like in dry seasons, they've had a rough year, didn't have much water, they think about other sources. Then the rains come, and maybe you put it off because of financing. And I guess that's what your whole discussion about resiliency is, if you have these sources, you certainly use them. But we have to always be thinking about the future when we need, other sources of water. So desalination has been around the Caribbean longer than you might think. As long ago, it was almost 100 years ago, some Caribbean islands were using evaporation to, just like if you take a pot of water at home, salt water, and you boil it, the water coming off the top doesn't have salt in it. So evaporation or distillation was used to create potable water way back in the early 1900s. I didn't even know this one, so I looked it up. That I guess Bermuda was one of the first in the 70s to go with seawater reverse osmosis systems. I thought this was interesting. You obviously have a lot more systems going in the last 10 years, and that's what I came up with as the installed capacity right now in the region. And I mentioned down here some of the issues are energy. You hear about that all the time. Pre-treatment is one that you should be aware of if you're thinking about going that direction. And cleaning, I mentioned. I didn't mention. Cleaning is very important too. You do have to clean the membranes periodically, and you need a good cleaning system to do that. And any one of these little subjects I touched on, we could talk probably the whole session on. I just wanted to mention it. I don't know how big these are, in terms of, I know corrosion. So desalinated water is a bit corrosive. It's more aggressive because we removed all the minerals, but carbon dioxide actually goes through the membrane. So the distribution system can experience a lot of corrosion. I mentioned brine. So brine is the reject after we desalinate the water. What do we do with the salt? Right? In desal, we just put them back to the ocean, and that's another whole subject. I've read a lot of articles that say so far in the world there hasn't been a negative environmental impact. But I do know you have to do a lot of studies when you're putting in an RO system on where you put the brine and how it affects the area. So I mentioned that. And taste, I don't know. If that's all the water you have to drink, you're certainly going to drink it. But some people, everyone, CWA has that competition where you judge who has the best water in the region. So that's a personal thing. But if you do go to some countries that are desalinating potable water, you'll notice the salty taste if you're not used to it. You'll notice it. It's going to be salty. This one is a little complicated. I actually pulled this out of somebody else's presentation, but I liked it because of the kilowatt hours, or kilowatts per cubic meter. And I looked that up on another source, and so the top would be RO. They mentioned secondary RO, but it's still reverse osmosis. And I've seen numbers a little bit lower than that, kilowatts per cubic meter, maybe 1 or even 2 kilowatts per cubic meter, but I think 3 is a pretty standard number I see in the literature. But look at that compared to evaporation. So it's a lot less energy intensity, you would imagine, than evaporation. But more than what you're doing if you're treating surface water, of course, or well water. I put this in here only because I just wanted to show that the brine is going to be so much more concentrated than the feed water. On seawater RO, the brine's going to be double. I mentioned something here because I didn't really talk about before. So, we always, you probably in your mind may think of reverse osmosis as just desalinating ocean water. But there's also brackish water reverse osmosis, where we're taking well water or even city water. Some bottled water companies take water from one of the water authorities and they run it through reverse osmosis. And in those cases, they're running at much higher recovery. I'll mention that in a sec what that is. But the brine's going to be a lot lower in dissolved solids. Well, it's lower than seawater, but look at the multiple. It can be 4 or 5 times the feed water. Seawater is only about 2 times the feed water. And the reason for that is, on seawater, we only recover about 50% of the water that we put into the system. The other 50 goes out as brine. And that's because the pressure required to overcome that osmotic pressure is so high that we just couldn't, we would need, I'm not even sure the membranes can handle it. They really have a limit on what they can handle. The pressure vessels, the cost of electricity. So you're only recovering, quite honestly, it's about 45% on seawater. But on brackish water, depending on the source, you can recover like 75–80%. So that's why I put this in here that, especially, I put this in here for another reason too. I'm thinking as COASA and all of you thinking about DeSalle, you're hearing about it, thinking about it as something maybe you need to look at for the future. I just wanted to mention that it's not just used in potable water. We've got, like I said in the last slide, we've got brackish and seawater applications, but you'd be surprised that in a country like St. Lucia, for example, that's got sufficient surface water, you've got reverse osmosis here on the island. It's in hotels, it's in industries, different places, and I have a few photos I'm going to show you in a sec. So there's like hotels using golf courses for that, all that water they need to create for irrigation. I know a couple of them in the Caribbean that have nice sized ROs, a couple million gallons a day of reverse osmosis water to irrigate the golf course. Hotels do it. I think they do it for a lot of just their own, like, if you want to call it resiliency, they want their own security of water source. And so by the ocean, they can use that water, but they also can use wells. Power plants use a lot of water for cooling towers. They're massive, and they use water for boilers, and they want really super pure water for the boilers to prevent scale. And also, the more pure your water is in the boiler, the less blowdown you need to make, so you use less energy, you're not blowing down hot water. So it's a big water savings, and cost savings benefit for power plants to use reverse osmosis treated water for their boilers. I just put this in here at the end because centralized or decentralized, and I think you got Fluence right back here, they're experts in decentralized. And I think the Suez guys, I'm sure have both, or both have both. And you can have big, we're going to show some photos here in a sec, some, big grassroots plants built that have a lot of concrete and tanks and all that. And they're $50–100 million plants. But you can also have decentralized reverse osmosis systems in containers that don't produce nearly as much water, but they can be used. They fill a lot of needs. This is, I just put a few plants in just as examples. I happen to have this slide from someone else's presentation. So this is one of the desal plants in Cortazal, Santa Barbara plant. The numbers are kind of small, but it's a pretty good sized plant. Yeah. 7.4 million gallons per day. And that, I think, was expanded. I think it was smaller originally. It was built originally in 2012. What this slide is about is they did an upgrade on capacity, and they actually used a new type of membrane to, they didn't build any more trains of membrane capacity. They just changed the membrane and got higher capacity. Anything else I want to see on there? So that, and also the photo, you can see, this is no little plant. I mean, there's, you've got ocean intake, you've got all the pre-treatment that I talked about. Inside the building, or where the RO system is itself, you got your storage tanks that probably have raw water and treated water tank. These are some non-potable systems. And all of these, actually I took all these photos, so I've seen all these. They're all in the Dominican Republic, actually. This is a mining application, a gold and copper mine. And those are the rest are all power plants. I put the pre-treatment in there again, just so you don't forget about that. You guys, no, you weren't Trinidad. Anyone here from Trinidad? Oh, okay, you were. Right. So I think have you all heard about the Desalcop plant? Probably. This is one. I guess it's maybe still is the largest plant in our hemisphere, and it used to rival the plants in the Middle East in terms of size, but now they're building these mega plants over there. But remember, I heard a few oohs when I said 7 million gallons per day. This plant originally produced 24 million gallons a day of desalinated water. Now it produces 40 million gallons a day. And if you remember back, I showed you that slide from Antigua. I was asking you if anyone recognized that RO system. So those vessels, those white vessels I showed you there, hold about 6 or 7 membranes. So one of those trains in the Antigua system maybe held, I'm going to say 70, 100 membranes. I don't know what plant APOA is going to talk about after lunch, but they've got a lot of plants now, and one of their plants probably has like 2,000 or 3,000 membranes. It's probably 4 or 5 million gallons a day. This plant has 20,000 membranes. 20,000 membranes. It's incredible. It's all inside the building, so I don't have pictures of it here to show you, but it's just pretty phenomenal. And also the other reason I put this photo in here is this is all their pre-treatment. They actually, a lot of you guys can relate to this, operators, they actually have like a potable water treatment plant before the desal. So they've got clarifiers because they want to get the sand out. That would just kill. Can you imagine if a membrane can take salt out of seawater, dissolved salt? Imagine what turbidity what sand would do to it. It would just foul the membrane immediately. It would kill your capacity. So they have a whole treatment plant. I think that's their clarifiers. I believe. I can't remember. These might be sludge treatment, but it's like a water treatment plant before the water treatment plant. And that they run well though. They run well because they've got such incredible pre-treatment. Where do you think these are? They're real close. What country do you think they're in?
Those.
They're in St. Lucia. So even though you think maybe you thought, well, we don't have our desalination in St. Lucia, you do. Now those pictures are a little bit old. They're mine. I took them also. They were in like 2014 on my computer. They're all hotels. This one, I don't know if you can tell. That's inside a container. So that you can, when you talk to fluents in the back, you can buy an RO system already built in a container. And that's I think all these are seawater, and they're all from hotels. And I don't know, you can get a couple 100,000 gallon per day capacity out of a 40-foot container. Countries that even in countries that have a lot of fresh water. But another reason I put that in there, I think we're going to talk a little bit about a training collaboration in the area of reverse osmosis. And you think, wow, I'm starting from zero. If you are, if you're a country, let's say, that treats surface water, and you're thinking about going toward reverse osmosis, you might feel like you're starting from zero in terms of expertise. But within your country, I'm sure every country in here has someone that has a reverse osmosis system in your country. It might be a bottled water producer, could even be a power plant. So it might not be the municipal authority that has it, but someone may have one. And you can play off of that expertise. So you've got a little more expertise in the country than you think you do in the area of reverse osmosis. Okay, so this is, I don't know much about this myself, but this is what I understand that COWASA is working on with Caribda. When I talked to Sean Myers, the president of Caribda, that's when I learned, I didn't even know, that Caribda is licensing some reverse osmosis training modules from the CETA, is the Southeast Desalting Association in the United States. Sounds like it's almost close to being finished. And I think the collaboration they're talking to you guys, Ignatius and you guys about is that we would get the modules, and then Kawasa, you already have the mechanism to certify operators. You would handle the certification of reverse osmosis plant operators. So I think you're going to see more of this. And I just mentioned that last time that I talked about before, which is we can build on, you already have some expertise in the country. And I guess just from a personal point of view, what I see is that we have to do some of this. You know, it's expensive to fly down to these things. It takes time and money, and I think what I like to see is that, so when Kawasa has something, maybe Caribe ties into that a little bit, because you already are here, right? You don't have to have a whole separate event, you have a whole separate set of expenses. Or CWA has an event, we're starting to now in Caribe participate with them. In the last couple of years, we were doing some pre-conference workshops in front of their conference, right? And we can do the same with you guys, or vice versa. So that we already have our venue.
Thank you, Jerry. Let's hear it again for Jerry. I'm sure that you've remembered quite a few things. That was such an awesome presentation, and reminds me of when I was in my chemistry classes and biology classes, and we were learning things on cutting a potato and learning about permeable and semi-permeable membranes. So it's really fascinating. I wish some of the, my nephews would have been here as they get ready for the exams. Right? But I'm sure you two would have learned, for those of us who are not involved in reverse osmosis. Somebody has a question in the back there, yes? Yeah, and I'm happy that you responded, because we seem not to, we want to get some feedback from the audience.
Yes. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Francis from Antigua Public Utilities Authority. Yes, what Jerry mentioned a while ago with CEDA will be something that we'll be very much interested in. Reasons being, the certification what we're doing now is kind of more focused towards groundwater and surface water treatment. And we have operators that would have focused mostly on this side, on reverse osmosis. So coming from that end, there's a question that they ask me every day: when are we going to get some training more specific to reverse osmosis operators?
I should have asked the questions. Wait, this is really the tip of an interesting point that Tess was making. I've been going to Antigua for many, many years. And so originally I went there when they were mostly treating surface water. And we used to supply, our company supplied them coagulants, we still do. And their main surface water plant is the LAPS, right, Tess? The LAPS. And outside the LAPS, like you guys have, so outside the plant is the big lake, right? The big reservoir. I used to think it was a big reservoir. Till one day, I'm talking 10, 15 years ago, I went there and there was a cow in the middle there eating grass. There was no water in the lake. So this reservoir was very shallow, right? And what fascinates me about Antigua is that they've gone from surface water and rely on, I didn't know it was probably waist deep, to primarily survive on reverse osmosis water now. But the point that Tessa's talking about, so they now have experts down there, guys coming from treating surface water, learning on that one plant that I had put up earlier. They learned on that one plant at Camp Elizabeth how to run an RO by themselves, really. Maybe whatever little thing they could pick up from, they would send people around. I know Tessa's traveled all over the world, really, to learn. And a supplier might come in and give a little session, and that's how they learned. And now, so recently we just went down to a little training with them. And so we bring like pans and tablets, and so how many RO operators? So I brought 10, 15 tablets. They have like 30 RO operators now. That's coming from surface water not that long ago to 30 guys that know what they're doing and running big plants. They recently took back, you know, sometimes you hear about these design, build, and operate. So they now took back one of these design, build, operate, where they're going to operate themselves. They have that much confidence now. So, but you guys know, a lot of times training is what you learn from the last guy in the job. It really is. And so I think this is going to be a real asset for a lot of people to have a real training course where you can have real certification. And I'll tell you, you think you can create one of those courses till you ever try. It's not easy. It's not easy. You know, I never did any of this volunteer stuff before. I did this about 2-3 years ago. Grady was the first place I really volunteered. And my first job was to run the workshops for like 2 years. And it's a lot more work than you think it is. All this to bring all these speakers together and coordinate it is a lot of work. And the other thing that Ignatius mentioned, to get that interaction, just not easy. It's another reason why I put those slides up there. And you do want that interaction, but all that aside, people that know how to do it, like CETA that have made a training course, they've already done it. They know how to present the material, they've got the exams. You guys, your organization, COASA, knows how to manage all that. So why don't we just, instead of recreating the wheel, that's what we're all going to do. We're going to try to use the materials that the guys that already have done it have prepared.
All right, thank you, Jerry. Any other comments, observations you have for Jerry? Yeah. So we are now going to the final presentation before lunch. We have done well for time. I would like now to introduce a man who really does not need any introduction. He's a veteran around the region in the water sector, water and wastewater sector. He hails from the Spice Isle and runs his own companies, Daniel and Daniel Engineering and Plumbing Solutions Grenada Limited. And he has over 30 years experience, and he's one who's really committed to promoting professionalism in the water sector in the region. And he is also a very good partner, not only as a former president of the CWWA, but in his own personal capacity as a professional. He has partnered with COASA in many of our training programs. So I'd like to, without further ado, welcome Mr. Alphonsus Daniel to the podium to present for us. From the perspective of wastewater.
Good afternoon to all. I don't like the mics because it makes you sound as a politician. But I know we're filling out your cards, but soon after we would want to take down the slides. Some of them make them faint. Okay, so as soon as you finish, we take down the lights. Let me just say from the onset, I'm happy to be here. I think I was at the first, the second, and I started missing some, maybe the third. And when Jean asked me to come and say something here about building resilience in the wastewater systems, well, obviously across the Caribbean, I thought, what a hell of a topic. How difficult that would be. Because you know, the reality is, what we're doing in the Caribbean, we're only treating 25% of our waste, you know. So you could imagine that, you just think about it, you think utilities are really thinking about building up resilience or trying to survive to treat what they have coming down. What's the reality? The reality is that we're dumping 75% plus of our raw sewage into the sea. So my task was to find out really if the water operators of the Caribbean are really concentrating on building resilience or just doing something based on the licks that they got from Maria and so on. So what I'll take you through quickly is what I found. And to be honest, what I found in the research on the net, the conclusion is the wastewater utilities are not doing much, right? So I should end right now and ask if you have questions. Yeah. But I took some time and went through and found a couple of things which I should leave with you and remind you that this climate change business is serious. You're clicking for me? Hello?
What's that?
Clicking?
Oh, just.
No, this is just a pointer. Where's yours?
Well, the pointer's on the clicker.
Okay. I was doing that.
Who last used it?
Jerry.
Oh, it's
All right, so that's us there.
That's the cash register.
I know it'll be after 12, so that's to keep you awake. But so we look at wastewater systems in the Caribbean and we're talking building resilience, mitigation, and some adaptation. Let's see what we have. We will talk sustainability, climate change basics, just to remind you some indicators of climate change. And I will tell you why I have to remind you of indicators. Predicting climate change impacts on the states, small island development states. That's important, bring it home. And we'll talk about climate change impacts on wastewater systems to take it down. And then we'll ask ourselves at the end, what do we do? Where do we go from here? And in terms of sustainability, I just wanted to I want to remind you what Al Gore said. And if you were looking at BBC World this morning, or just after 7, he was on TV and they were mentioning it again. He said, the next generation will be justified in looking back at us and asking, what were you thinking? Couldn't you hear what the scientists were saying? Couldn't you hear what your mother nature was saying to you? And in some parts of our region, and in what we call the inner cities and backyard, they would punctuate that with some bad words, I'll show you. Right? But Al Gore said that, and you could find the documentary and check on it. Climate change. What is climate change? Remember, it's changes in weather patterns for an extended period of time, 30 years plus, and don't mix climate change with climate variability, right? They all exist together, but there is a difference, and you must get to know the difference. Climate change is happening. Isn't it happening? Yeah? And it's happening, and I want us to remember humans are largely the ones that are responsible for recent climate change. We human beings. Climate change is already affecting the water resources and water systems. We know that. Right? We can take action to mitigate these causes of climate change, and we could do some adaptation also. So the causes, if you remember the causes, we went back, fossil fuels burnt by us human beings, and that's the primary cause of climate change. Mitigation in itself, simply put, right? It refers to actions to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases, as we call it. And adaptation is behaving as how bacteria started there, behave, and so on, to protect themselves when they get a shock and change. So we do actions to build resilience and to adjust on the impacts of change. Okay? So climate change is considered to be, and that's the literature coming now, they know wastewater operators around the Caribbean, around the world, agree that climate change will be the main challenge for all urban wastewater systems in not too distant future. Alright? They established too that climate change has a dual effect on wastewater treatment. And that one is interesting. Now, during the process of wastewater treatment, you have two things happening. Obviously, you're getting more extreme weather events, and that would lead to more untreated sewage flows, increased flooding. Because when all the water flooded, they're going into your manholes, and they're heading straight down to the treatment plant. And on the other hand, and that's the backside of the coin, due to increased scarcity of resources, some of the plants will be going dry, and then we will be forced in the future to recycle. Some of us ducking away from it to recycle, right? And I see you looking at me, And I tell my students all across the Caribbean that when they go to New York, nobody asks what they're drinking. And let me tell you, I was struck in Argentina 6 years ago when Daniel Moss presented that in New York was recycling water, wastewater for drinking purposes since 1950. I ain't hear you. Since 1950. And all things from the Caribbean, if you talk about recycling, is objectionable, you start getting worried and so on. But when we go to New York, everybody was thinking of what's going on and shut down Flatbush, right? And nobody remember that it's very possible. And worry about what you're drinking anyway. But I drink it because they can't put anything.
Yeah.
They can't put regs. They can't put anything that will be detrimental to human life and so on. So I drink it. So we have to start getting accustomed to that. So those who have the big desal plants now have to remember that you will have less water going to the plant, and then you will be forced to recycle to get treated water. So bear that in mind. Now when you start talking about climate change and wastewater in itself, there's one point I must mention to you, because you will get flagged for that, and this one. When you're treating wastewater, you're actually producing greenhouse gases too. So you have to bear that in mind, right? We have carbon dioxide going up in all the aerobic processes. You have carbon dioxide going up also. You have methane in the anaerobic, for example, the anaerobic reactors and so on. You have methane producers that are going up in the atmosphere also. And we have the nitrous oxide when you have the nitrification and nitrification processes. So bear that in mind. If you've been taken to task when you're doing a presentation on that, be prepared and arm yourself with this fact. And for the doubting Thomases, for those who believe that climate change is a Chinese hoax, I decided to stick this one. I like this one. Yeah? For those who believe that it's a Chinese hoax, you have 10 indicators of global warming. You can see them behind there? There the air temperature near the surface going up. Water vapors, all that increasing. Temperature, ocean, the temperature over the ocean is going up. The temperatures in the ocean, yeah? On the surface, sea level rise, yeah? The temperature on land. We're feeling it right now in the Caribbean, yeah? And for those of you all who gone to who looking at Himalayas and so on and so forth, you'll find out that, and you'll see that the snows, the glaciers and so on, they're melting like hell. Even the floating ice in the sea, they're getting less. And what that do? Obviously, it provokes the rise in sea levels also. So these are 10 simple indicators, and we can't turn our blind eye to it. Right. So what? Coming home now in the cities, Caribbean cities, what do we expect? We know it is coming. Just to summarize it, again, precipitation changes, increasing the length of dry season. We're feeling it right now. We have the increased frequency and high intensity rainfalls, events. We spoke about it whole day. Temperature increases, we know that, and sea level rising. And that impacts definitely on our water resources, the agriculture, we talk, the forests, the coastal areas, health, and on the species and natural areas also. How much of you all realize that 11 o'clock in the night, flies ain't sleeping yet? You used to see that when you grew up? Serious? Yeah? Flies are up late. Anytime you get up, a fly up. That used to happen before. Yeah? Definitely. I definitely think that something is happening. Something is happening. They're sensing something different. For them, the night is day and all of that. Something happening. Right. For countries in the region, and that's important to know, we'll get a decrease between 10 to 20% of rainfall for every 2% rise in temperature. And you know what that is? Drought, water insecurity, and with saline intrusion. And it reminds me of some work we did in St. Kitts, 15, 16, 17. They rely on 69, 70%. We like to say 69% now because desal take away 1% from that. They rely heavily on groundwater. and especially groundwater. The wells, most of the wells are in the Basque Valley. And for the last 10, 12 years, this water is becoming salty. You won't get it recharged because the rain not falling, and you keep pumping, you keep mining the water, obviously, and sea level rising outside it, and you keep pulling it out, so obviously you get silent intrusion. And there are concrete evidence. You go to St. Kitts and ask, look at the water quality, you look at it, staring you in the face, that you have silent intrusion. Seriously.